I want this to be as valuable for anybody who's taking time out of their Monday evening to listen to this. So please, if there's a way as I'm speaking to make it interactive, or Andrea, if there's a way that people can type in questions, I'd like to be able to respond to them and answer questions that way if we can, because I want to make sure that I'm providing as much value as possible to anybody who's on this call or watching the future recording. So if anybody wants to steer me in a different direction of what I'm going on or anything like that, I don't have a set strict speech or presentation or anything like that. Just the idea of kind of speaking about our experiences and what we see in dental offices and with dental hygienists and dental assistants and things like that. So please feel free, ask questions. I won't feel free to interrupt me, and also give me a wave if the video stalls out or anything like that and I'm talking and it seems like I'm frozen or anything like that. Just let me know.
Okay, great. I'll monitor the chat, and if questions come up, then everyone feel welcome to type questions if you have any.
Yeah, please. So in speaking with Denise and Andrea about what maybe I could be speaking about, what came up was sort of the theme of office dynamics, office environment, communication styles, and problems that can come up in a dental office. And I can assure you that I'm here because of my experiences. This is not me promoting TempStars, but I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it, only to give you the context of why I might feel like I've got a finger on the pulse of dental office environments and things like that. So right now, I mean, I started TempStars back in 2015, just as a way for offices and hygienists and assistants to connect directly with each other. And now, I mean, fast forward to now, I think we have over 4,000 dental offices and over 12,000 dental hygienists and assistants that we work with and connect through our system. Not this year, but we're quickly approaching 100,000 dental temping shifts completed. We've expanded into the United States in 8 cities in the United States. And we're a very small team, which means I'm very heavily involved in the day-to-day of running and operating TempStars and working with our support team and our support team manager and marketing and all of those sorts of things. So just through the sheer volume of connections we make and ironing out situations and things like that, it gives me a reasonably good perspective on things we see, challenges we see, frustrations on the side of hygienists or assistants who are working at offices, frustrations on the side of dental offices when a hygienist or assistant is working there. And so when Andrea and Denise said, well, how about this as a topic? I feel okay as somebody who can kind of speak to it. And another one of the things that I care very much about and speak regularly on is things like leadership and building healthy team cultures in dental offices and things like that. So I give presentations of those sort to dental office managers and dentists, because there's two sides to that equation. And I feel strongly about both, where one is there's a real shortage and gap and a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions about what good leadership looks like and what it means and the importance of building a healthy team culture in a dental office. And so I like to speak to dental office managers and dentists to offer perspectives and insights and inspiration about what the good things about that look like. But then on the other side of the coin is the idea of hygienists and assistants and anybody who's working in a dental office to feel as though they can be an engaged member of the team and contribute to a positive culture. And one of the concepts of sometimes somebody will go into work at an office and say, oh, what a great team culture. I really like it here. And that person might be there absorbing and enjoying that great culture and that great team without contributing to it. And so it's kind of that I really care about both sides of that equation of people working in dental offices caring about contributing to a healthy team culture and being inspiring and positive and uplifting to people. And at the same time, that's difficult to do if the office managers or the owners or the dentists are not also along that lines as well. So I like to speak about both of those things because it's hard to have a healthy dynamic in a dental office without both. Now, my feeling is it kind of lands on the owner, the dentist, and the managers to be planting the garden, or at least getting the garden ready for those good things to happen. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've been a practicing dentist 22 years now. I've owned 2 dental practices. One I started from scratch and grew that one. And then I owned another one that I had purchased from another dentist. Now I practice dentistry 1 day a week at a mental health hospital, and because I really love doing clinical dentistry, but the rest of the time I'm working with the TempStars team and growing TempStars and things like that. So I've spoken to some graduating classes of hygienists who are in school about to graduate, getting into the field, and kind of heard some of their questions and concerns. And so I'll kind of maybe use those as a starting point and things like that in terms of things that you can run into. But again, please feel free to ask questions or steer me in any direction that you want me to speak about or give an opinion about or anything like that. So there's good news. And I'm not even going to say that there's bad news about this, but there's counterpoints to it, I guess. Time-wise, in terms of the job market in, frankly, North America, and really not just dentistry, is, and this is kind of on the positive side of things, that for people who want to work in dental offices and find good work homes and enjoy where they are, there's a real shortage of people available to work. And it's not just Ontario, it's not just BC, it's not just Canada, and it's not just dentistry, it's everywhere. Every business is scrambling and really trying to do everything they can to find good people to work at their businesses. And what that means for dental dental hygienists is there's a lot of opportunities. And so we're constantly getting messages and emails and questions about, can you help us find, there's nobody out there, can you help us find somebody, all of those sorts of things. And it's really spiked up in the last year or so. But again, as we go into the United States, where we haven't even been operating that long yet, we're just running into those same things where offices are saying, help us find people, that sort of thing. So the reason I mention that is in the context of office dynamics. So I guess one of the things to think about is now is a good time if you happen to be in a situation where you feel you are not being treated with the proper professional respect and in terms of maybe the hourly rates, which were common, say, 5 years ago, have changed over the last 5 years. And so I'm not suggesting everybody go out and quit their job, but I want you to know that you've got a little bit of a leverage point for conversations if you're working at a dental office where you feel they're not respecting you as a dental professional. And so that's a nice thing to sort of have in your pocket to say, well, I'm going to do what I can to try to make things work at this dental office, but I'm banging my head against the wall, and I think there might be other opportunities out there. Well, I can tell you there's a lot of opportunities out there. So just something to kind of keep in your pocket like that. Now, I guess we all know there are certainly great dentists and dentists who care about leadership and good, healthy team cultures and treat people with professional respect, and managers who feel the same way. It's no secret there's a lot of jerk dentists out there and managers who are not the best people to work with and deal with. For me, that's where I really try to lean into providing inspiration and resources for good management and leadership and healthy team culture building. But if you happen to be in a situation where you feel like you're being disrespected, spoken to poorly in front of patients or in front of the team or things like that, those are just really unhealthy things. And it's certainly not something I advocate or support. And in fact, I'm quite against that. And sometimes I hear stories and I think, why does somebody think that it's okay to speak to another person like that? Let alone somebody, but just to speak to another human being with disrespect or toxicity or things like that. So we know it's out there. So it's tricky. Imagine you were. Oh yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
This is not a criticism of EHS, but can I just ask, wondering if while you're talking, and this is brought up by one of our members, we do have dental hygienists who run their own business here as well. So you can just expand your thinking around who the owners are to include those guys, because we expect that to grow. They've only been able to do that for a couple of years, but our dental hygiene practitioners in BC,
absolutely,
our members, are also owners.
Okay,
But there's
so
none of them are assholes like the dentists are.
well, I guess maybe I can ask a question about that then. So, because there's kind of two lenses to look at this. And so if there are dental hygienist practitioners, I can then kind of put the hat on about if you're an owner of a dental hygiene clinic as an owner, what are some ways to kind of optimize a good, healthy team and things like that, which is just, and I apologize, that's just a different lens to speak of. Now, the other side of that lens is if you're a hygienist who is an employee at a clinical dental hygiene clinic that is owned by a hygienist. So maybe just what do you think about that? Should I keep on through the lens of somebody working at a dental office, but just expand the description of the owner to be a hygienist owner as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'll get questions if any of them are on specific, but I think it's really about expanding it and reminding ourselves that, I mean, most dental hygienists in BC are employed by dentists or employed in that sort of
Yeah.
traditional structure, but we do have more and more, and hopefully we'll have more and more who are either employers or
Yeah.
employed by someone who's a dental hygiene practitioner. So yeah, I think what you're saying is really great and important. I would just expand it to include both.
100%. And thanks for pointing that out, and apologies. And I wonder if
Not needed.
when I start to think about maybe when we were talking about it originally, and the idea of sometimes the owner being disrespectful to the hygienist, I wonder, is it more likely, which I would imagine, that as a dental hygienist who owns a clinic, they might just innately feel a little more professional respect and co-professionalism with other hygienists who work in their clinic. And maybe there's, and maybe anybody listening could let me know. I mean, to me, it would be less apt to be a situation where there would be professional toxicity or that sort of thing in an environment where the owner is also a hygienist and the person working at the office is also a hygienist. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it would be great if any of our members can comment on that. I don't work in a clinic, so I'm not the best person to answer that. Catherine says she agrees. Does anybody want to unmute themselves and speak to this?
I'll speak to it.
Yeah.
Speak away.
I've worked in both dental offices and in dental hygiene practices with owners, and have had both experiences in both locations.
Okay.
So I found that by and large, we were much more collaborative with hygienists.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I would imagine. And so, yeah. But anyway, that's a great point, and I'll be sure to kind of include that in it. But if we're talking about somebody who's working in a dental hygiene clinic, I guess from what we were talking about before the call, it seemed more likely that there was some disrespect coming from the dentist side towards a hygienist about, I'm telling you what to do sort of thing and dictating to you, and you're not a professional as much as you are an employee here and you have to do what I say type of thing.
We seriously get, we get the majority of complaints about office environment are around that. So
Yeah,
yes,
right.
it's very common.
Great. So, so you have a few different, I guess, options or approaches. If you're working in a dental office where maybe you feel it's not a good fit for you, or you might have some thoughts or feelings about the dental hygienist or dentist owner or the office manager, that sort of thing. For me, my always default thing is go to myself and think, how am I? Is there something I can be doing or saying or a way that I can be being that will change the situation? And so, and even for me, and even I tell practice owners and just say, the first rule of any leadership or management is always look in the mirror first. And so one of the things about that is just, I guess, some self-reflection to say, well, how am I doing? How am I being? That sort of thing in the office. And then step two would be, if you can, try to have an open and honest conversation with the person or the manager or the owner that you might feel you have an issue with. And so if you can find some private time to just say, look, this is what's going on and it's a concern, and this is why it's a concern, and this is what I'd like to see done differently, that's the first step. Now, how successful that is going to be mixed, depending on if this is a blind spot of the owner or it's just something about the way that they are and this is how they run their business and that sort of thing. And then second from there is you have to also realize there's a little bit of risk with that, with having that conversation, or even asking for a raise or things like that, because what it ends up boiling down to is that no matter even if it's completely the owner's fault, the manager's fault, typically what the owner can't leave. So if you run into a conflict situation, the reality is it ends up resolving in a way that works for you, or if somebody's leaving, it ends up just not being the owner. And again, I'll go back to the good news of that is there's lots of opportunities for hygienists in the profession right now, and offices are really desperately looking for people. And so you do have some flexibility in terms of interviewing and trying to find a dental office that's a good fit for you. And so, and often I find, for a hygienist or an assistant who's walking into an interview, you get a real sense for the culture and the tone of the office very early on when you first walk into an office, be it a hygiene clinic or a dental clinic, in terms of, does the person at the front desk stand up and warmly welcome you and have a seat and good to see you and do you want a drink of water, that sort of thing, and how are you welcomed in for it, versus somebody who just kind of barely looks at you and says, have a seat, they'll be with you, those sorts of things. So I guess there's not necessarily an easy answer to say, there's this problem at the dental office and the dentist is treating me this way. 100% have the conversation if you can. And believe me, I know that can be a stressful thing and an awkward thing. And sometimes you just throw up your hands and you say, what's the point? They're not going to change. And admittedly, sometimes that's true. But I think that's the first step, is kind of first think about, is there something that I could be doing differently that could improve the situation? Secondly, have the conversation. But if you have that professional, respectful conversation with the owner or the hygienist owner or the dentist or the office manager, and it's going nowhere and no change is happening, well, they should have sort of a heads up that your resume might be out there. And now, hopefully, if you're going out there and interviewing and maybe you're looking for another position somewhere, you're finding somewhere that feels like it's a better fit for you and that they're kind of warm and friendly and caring and treat you with the respect as a professional that you deserve. But at the same time, and the reason I always, and again, for everyone, myself, everybody on our team, every dentist, hygienist, everybody, it's always about self-reflection. So what you want to be careful of is thinking, oh, there's this real problem at this dental office. I have to go somewhere else because this place is terrible. But now you're carrying around the thing that's causing it to be terrible. So it's important to spend some time on some self-reflection to say, how can I be an engaged member of this team and contribute to positivity and uplift people I'm contributing to and focus on the service and the patients, and bring that with you as you go to the next office, because you'd hate to find the ideal work home and you feel great there, but it ends up being that you might not be a culture fit for that office. And so the good dental offices, the ones who care about management and leadership, and hygiene clinics, they really do care about having people on their team who are going to contribute to that type of a culture and that kind of a team. And so, yeah, that's kind of my advice on that, is try to have the conversation, try to be self-reflective, but at the same time, especially in today's environment, just be aware that you have options out there. And there are offices that, I mean, there's hundreds of different kinds of office cultures and things that different offices prioritize and treat people, but there's going to be a good fit out there for you. So I would just say that's kind of how I would approach it. So, Andrea, what do you think about, anybody have any questions about that? Anybody have any specific situations they want to ask me about or describe that they're in, or anything else that you want me to kind of speak about?
You can either type in the comments or you can put your hand up and speak aloud. I'm open to both. I'm actually going to ask you a question just in light of what we were talking about at the beginning of this. It's a really tough conversation if you're not sure as a dental hygienist if your employer, the dentist, is vaccinated. How do you even approach that? Because it is private health information, but at the same time, if they're not and they haven't put anything in place, you're going to not be able to work even if you are. So how do you start a conversation like that?
That's a great point. And what makes it easier or harder is the nature of your relationship with the owner or the manager. I guess it would be the owner in this case. And so you're right. And one of the things that we found in COVID is it really exposes a lot of cracks in owners and managers who have poor communication or poor culture building, because now they set up this tension with their team that makes every conversation awkward and difficult. Now, I guess, again, without it being easy, if you approach it, maybe rehearse it a few times and approach it in a respectable way and just say, this mandate is coming down and I really need to know if this office is going to be open when the mandate comes down, and will you be addressing it with the team in terms of the viability of this office remaining open based on your vaccination status. Something like that. It's important to approach it with a professionalism and rehearse it, maybe write it down a few times, and then be prepared for what the answer is. And my goodness, we all wish we could control what the other person's going to say or do, but what we can try to do is think about what we can do and what's under our control and our own influence. And so if you say, this is what's going on, or I have this question, if the person is denigrating about their answer or goes off on some kind of angry tangent or something like that, that's probably just not a great, healthy work environment. And kind of like what you're saying, Andrea, if there's ends up being some hygienists who aren't practicing anymore, again, I hate to go back to this, but dentists and hygienist owners and managers, they've got to realize that now's the time where good leadership and good management and good team culture building is where it counts. And if you want good people on your team and good people working at your office, it's incumbent upon them to step it up so that they can find and hire good hygienists and good assistants. And so sometimes people have to vote with their feet because it's hard. You can't really, as someone who's working in a dental office, you can't really grab the steering wheel and just start steering things around the way you want. You can have those respectful conversations and hopefully they go well. And, the right dentist, the right owner, the right hygienist clinician owner should be addressing it in a professional way and realizing that the people who work at their office have concerns about their livelihood and their work. So Andrea, I guess I can't say that, don't worry about it being awkward. I think rather than trying to resist it being awkward, just say, all right, this is going to be awkward, but I'm doing the best I can. And I've written it down. I've rehearsed it a few times in the mirror or with a friend or spouse or something, and then have that conversation. Or if you have a better relationship, maybe with a manager at an office, have that. And then the manager can maybe talk to the owner and say, hey, I think we need to talk to the team about this because 3 people have come and spoken to me about this now. I think we need to address it as a team. So maybe there's a little chain of conversation that can work its way up through more comfortable conversations, depending on how your relationship is. Maybe there's a favorite, maybe the owner, if it's a dentist owner, the dental assistant has a close relate, and you can say to the assistant, do you know, is the dentist planning on speaking about this? Or same with the hygienist owner, if there's somebody else in the office who feels like they're closer with or have a more connection with, maybe it's easier to approach that person and just say, this is what's on my mind. Do you know if they're going to be addressing this or speaking about it? Might be kind of an indirect way to kind of get the information you need, or at least prompt the owner to have that conversation with the team.
Yeah, fair, because I know I hope that most dentists have been forthcoming, but it's one of the things I worry about, that people are going to be blindsided on that day and find out, oh, we're all out of work. Great. Right. Thanks for letting us know in advance. We do have a couple questions. So Catherine is asking if you could expand on the meaning of dental office culture.
Oh, yeah. So culture has a definition of what a team culture is. Now, not every office and not every owner contributes to the same culture. So I'll give you some examples. So by definition, the culture is an unspoken and shared way that everybody on the team sees the world and sees each other and behaves in those micro moments where there's not a direct instruction. And so culture fills in the micro gaps of management and employee manuals and things like that. And I love speaking about this, so thank you for that question. So the culture always comes from the owner of the practice. Now, sometimes the owner of a practice, hygienist or dentist, doesn't pay any attention to culture. And then what ends up happening is you have a very loose and weak culture where there's often a lot of miscommunication and toxicity and that sort of thing. And so one of the things I speak to about practice owners and managers is it's critically important and incumbent on them to define what their values are and their vision of a practice, and to find and hire and coach and train and connect with the people on their team who match their values. Because there can be a value. So here's a culture. A friend of mine, a dentist friend, has a really high clinical skill culture. And so their office, their number one priority and their number one value is top clinical care. And so that's not the same culture for every office. Every office should have high levels of clinical care, but they might not put that at the top. And so everybody needs to, but you could have another one that just says our culture here and our value is treating everyone like they're our friends and family. And so that's a culture of being friendly and getting along and everybody communicating. And of course, you need clinical skills there too. But the top thing might be, look, we have a culture of friendliness and kindness, and people come in, and that same office might say, yeah, well, we're friendly and kind, but the most important thing is that if you're going to work in our office, you have to care about getting all of that calculus off. You have to care about those crown margins. You have to care that your occlusion is right, all of those sorts of things. Because the culture here is clinical skill and high quality. And then there's other things that there's probably a sensible office probably has 5 to 7 values, and they're sort of ranked in order of priority. And so the idea is you as a leader, as an owner, you have to self-reflect and say, what do I genuinely care about? And what do I want the people around me to share about what I care about? And that's how the culture gets built. The problem is, and the reason culture ends up being so nebulous or poorly defined, or why it's rare to find an office with a strong, good culture, is there's a lot of owners or managers who don't spend the time to kind of define the values, hire based on values, coach based on values, and sometimes exit based on not being a fit for the values. Because culture doesn't happen by accident. It happens by intention, and it happens by, especially early on, strong intention. It takes really intention of defining and hiring and coaching and guiding and being the model of what that culture is. So that's kind of what you look for. And again, if the owner of the clinic hasn't cared about culture, then they're just hiring a bunch of people and hopefully they get along, but sometimes there's miscommunication, or then it turns into, oh, this person doesn't care about being friendly, so now I have to micromanage them to make sure that they're saying friendly things to the people on the team or to the patients, whereas that's really, really difficult. And so the idea is, and I remember the guy that's founded Starbucks, somebody asked him, like, how do you train everyone to smile so much when they're serving coffee? He says, no, I just hire people who like to smile. And so it's much easier to find people who have an innate attraction to the type of culture and the type of values that you have. But it takes a lot of reflection and thought to say, yes, this is the team I want to build. This is the office I want to have. This is the vision I have for what this team is going to accomplish. But it ends up being all of those things that happen smoothly because everyone has that same mindset. They see each other in similar ways. They see the patient in similar ways. They see the practice in similar ways. And it fills in all of those micro gaps where there's nobody micromanaging them, but it just ends up that they act in that way that follows the culture.
Yeah. So Kelly, and Catherine says, thank you, Kelly. I'm just going to come back to your question. It's just that that ADHH has asked something that is kind of related to that. She says, what do you think about having an annual review with your bosses and your view has nothing to do with your job performance with patients, but you're being told that your colleagues are saying things about you without being given a chance to clear the air on your end. Things being said are too long bathroom breaks, unsharpened instruments. These things seem more subjective complaints than actual performance concerns.
Right. So I just want to make sure I understand the question. So the question is, sorry?
What time is
okay.
Bailey's appointment on Saturday?
I think this is someone
11?
who doesn't turn their microphone off and is having a conversation.
So annual reviews, if you go in for an annual review and that's when you find out how you've done in the past year, to me, that's a little tiny bit of a flag because that is someone who might as an owner, manager, leader might be a bit disconnected from what's going on. And again, even just from that one question, sounds like that might not be a strong culture about working together and supporting each other and having open communication with each other about concerns and things like that. So sometimes you run into those situations. And again, I hate to say, but a good, strong, healthy culture is more, it's less than 50%. And so often you end up having to deal with these types of situations. We always have to go back to saying to the owner or whoever is doing your performance review, give your side of the story. Now, at the same time, realize that maybe there's elements of this performance review that you need time to reflect on. And I don't know all of the details based on that question, but if the owner has, say, a team of 8 people, and people are always going to the owner saying, oh, this person, well, maybe there is a problem. Now, certainly you should be given the opportunity to speak to and say, well, I'm not sure why that's said, or you could ask for more details about it to clarify it, but you should be given the opportunity to have your voice. But again, and going back to kind of what I said at the beginning, there is always an element of self-reflection. And so just try to think about, well, why would those people, and maybe it's a toxic environment. They're out there, 100%. Maybe you're great at your job and you're threatening, other people around you feel threatened by that. And so they start saying things like that. And I guess we still go back to that self-reflection, figure out the conversation, professional, respectful conversation, voice your concerns, voice what you'd like to see different. Give it a little bit of time for the situation to change or improve. And then, sometimes you've just got to vote with your feet and get your resume out there and really try to find a place that feels more like home, and where maybe the owner has put more effort into building a good, strong, healthy team culture where people aren't seeing each other like that. Unfortunately, it's out there, but there's only so much you can do for something like that. But sometimes it's hard to avoid a conversation that gets your blood pressure up a bit and gets you a little bit nervous. Sometimes it's not possible to avoid those conversations. So you have to kind of plan for it and take a few deep breaths. And if you care about that office and you care about what you're trying to accomplish with it, sometimes you have to have those conversations and then see how it goes after that. Give it some time and vote with your feet if it isn't changing.
Yeah, thanks. I will say for my part, that conversation is important because I have had that situation where staff have said, oh, so-and-so spends all their day in the bathroom. They're probably just texting. And in fact, you will have seen on our recent wage and employment survey that we actually asked about accommodation, because sometimes there's a reason that person is in the bathroom, where they have IBS, or they're pregnant, or there's so many reasons why people might be taking longer bathroom breaks. There's reasons why people may have unsharpened instruments. There's ways to sort of look at that and say, okay, what's the accommodation needed? And one of the things many of you will know that Afifa Eiter is working with us on the disability and access issues, and that's part of her file now, is to say, what are the accommodations that dental hygienists need that maybe they're not getting out there from whoever they work for or whoever their school or whatever. So I think it's an important question. I'm just going to jump back because Kelly has asked, how do you escape the stronghold of corporate offices that make it difficult to get things such as a raise?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I'm not a huge proponent or fan of the corporatization of dentistry for a few reasons. But that's one of them, is that they're very tight pursed. Their purse strings are very tight. Now, we work with some of the corporate dental offices, and I know some of them fairly well. And I will tell you this, I haven't heard of any corporate dental chain DSO that is unscrupulous. It could be cheap, but I haven't, of all the corporate DSOs and that sort of thing, I don't have anything against in terms of how they conduct themselves, in terms of following through on things they do, or having good ethics or principles or things like that. But there are issues that I'm not a huge fan of it overall. That being said, again, there's kind of a wake-up call for dental offices and hygiene offices, or anybody who's looking for good people to work in their offices. the demand has really skyrocketed. And I'm not trying to tell everyone, go and quit your jobs and get a better job at more money or anything like that. But just realize there's opportunities out there. And then, as I was saying I was speaking with a graduating class of dental hygienists a few weeks back. The other side of that coin is knowing how rare it is, or uncommon, to find a great work home where you get along with everyone and you enjoy working there and they're caring about patient care and clinical quality and things like that. Really try not to discount that above chasing the next couple of dollars per hour type of thing, because I will tell you that maybe it's a few dollars an hour that you wish you could make more, but you love the office, and you could say, well, they're not paying me enough, and that's how they're showing they're not appreciating me. I'm going to go find something else. Well, you probably know this, but similarly to someone who's interviewing for a job, if there's a dental office who's looking to hire you, they're also going to put their best foot forward and tell you all these amazing things about this job that you're applying for. And, oh, don't worry, and all of this. And then they'll say things, and then you think, okay, this sounds great. I'm going to leave this job that's pretty good, get a few extra dollars per hour, and then you start working there. And then you find out it's not exactly as they described. And that kind of happens for both things. I mean, sometimes you would interview somebody and they sound fantastic, and you're like, okay, you start on Monday or next week, and then they come on board and they're hired, but they're not quite what they described in their interview, and it doesn't quite work out. So it ends up coming from both sides, but think of it as the whole package, because if you think, oh, this is a great office, I'm appreciated here, it's not as much money as I think I could earn or that I think I should earn, and you could kind of roll the dice a little bit and say, well, I'm going to get my resume out there, and maybe the interview goes great and it sounds fantastic, and you leave and you find out what it's really like to work in that office, and maybe it's as fantastic as they say, maybe it's not, maybe it's a few dollars more an hour. It's kind of a grass is always green on the other side thing. And that was one of my messages to the graduating class of new hygienists, is just appreciate and don't discount the value of finding a work home where you're treated well, you like going in, the people who you work with are inspiring and uplifting and not toxic and kind of bringing you down sort of thing. So just, I would say, consider the whole package that way. And if you're at this, what you're saying, a corporate dental office, and you can't get a raise, well, I guess consider the whole package and say, well, is it also a dental office that I don't really much care to work at? Well, if it is, there's probably a better opportunity out there for you. But if it's otherwise a fantastic office, then you kind of have to balance the whole package of what the situation is like.
What makes a good dental hygienist? That's a legit question someone has asked, Catherine.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you, it's a great question. And it's the way to answer that is similar to the question of what makes a great dental assistant as well, or I guess anybody else working in the office, because it's different depending on the office and the priorities and values of the person who's owning and hiring the person. There are hygienists and assistants who could go and work at an office and the owner thinks, this person is awesome. This is the best hygienist we've ever had. And it's a perfect match for the culture and the values of that office. And so, wow, this is a great hygienist. I'll write reference letters, as many as they want. They're fantastic. But that same hygienist could go into a different office with different values and a different culture and just not fit. And they're kind of be more just not a good fit, and kind of more miscommunication and things like that. And then the owner's thinking, this person had 10 reference letters, but they're now, sometimes the dentist is not, or hygienist owner is not setting them up for success as well. But I can tell you overall, I mean, it's a person who adds to the positivity in the practice if they can, who shows up on time or early, who has a positive attitude and sees their coworkers and the patients as, fellow humans and treats them well and has good communication skills, good clinical skills, of course, but somebody who, and again, and I guess really what I'm talking about is for my offices and hygienists and assistants and receptionists who work there, we were always just looking for people who, for us, were at that good culture fit where we can't micromanage somebody into being friendly or every tiny spicule of calculus, whatever our priorities were. We had a very strong hygiene program. And so we're always just looking for somebody who was a good fit for that. And for me, during the interview process, that was something I really talked about. And I would say, this is not an easy practice to work at for everyone, because, and not because anybody is mean or bad, but we place a very high priority on quality clinical care, but not at the expense of being a really good, kind person. And so to have that, for us, to have that balance of somebody who is so nice and so friendly and so thoughtful and goes out of their way to help others, but also just knocks it out of the park, either clinically or through reception or treatment planning, to have both of those things. Because for us, for our team, you couldn't just be a great, friendly person who was kind and thoughtful and not be able to do the things that are required for the position in terms of either hygiene or assisting or reception or treatment coordinating. So for us, it was always the balance of those two. It's kind of the personality and thoughtfulness and the clinical skills type of thing.
So this one is probably more me, you, and that is a question of, after these many months, what percentage of hygienists and dentists do we think are not vaccinated? Can't speak to the dentist issue. And I will try and figure out if BCDA, our counterpart, has done any work around that. But as you know, we just put out a survey, so I can tell you that after 1,200 responses, which is a very good sample size, so we're within a couple of margin points of error, 11% of dental hygienists in BC are not vaccinated. And it doesn't sound like much, but in a profession of 4,500, that's a big chunk of dental hygienists we stand to lose on the day that this vaccine mandate comes down. So definitely very concerning for us. Sherry, I see a very long question from you. I'm just wondering if you would pop up your mic and just ask it, because then I don't have to read it all. But if you say no, then I will understand, read it all.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm asking someone to turn down the hockey game behind me. I had a question where, when I moved to BC and I had to write the BC boards, a hygienist wrote them with me, and we discussed that she had moved after working in a periodontal office in Edmonton to one in Victoria, where she was expected to do and bill out 16 units of root planing on every patient, whether they needed it or not. Like they would be scheduled, and she really felt she didn't feel that her training and her expertise was being considered. That this was more of she was being used as an income center, but more of it gets to integrity and honesty. And I found that. Yeah, this has happened before, and very few dentists will address it. It came up in the 90s when we had an office manager come from Vancouver to give a assessment, a business manager, and it turned out that my daily income for the practice, which was important, was about 60% less than somebody over in Saanich. And when I phoned that hygienist, it turned out that she billed when the patient wasn't even in the chair. She billed for time rather than what she did. And it goes back like 20 years, but I just remember this idea that your value is what you produce as opposed to what you actually are doing, and then the value that you can give your patients, because they should become healthier and have no bleeding and be given skill building capacity, which in some offices, the hygienist does no OHI. They're just scalers, and it's a little bit of a factory. And I feel that if we don't put that factor into dental hygiene, where you have a relationship with your patient, and if my patients still bleed when the Toffelmeyer goes on, if they're still using Toffelmeyers, then there's something that I haven't shown them. You know, I really feel like it's a reflection on the hygiene services in that practice. So I don't know that this is a question, but I see this as a bit of an elephant in the room often, where mature hygienists, I was really lucky to work for one of the best dentists in BC, but they're not given, or maybe they aren't able to build on that experience. Actually, the dentist to be that second set of eyes, and also the value that they bring in on looking at the full treatment plan rather than just how many units built in that eye. So that was I don't know, I got into this a little late. I'm calling from down in Mexico, but I've got 50 years of dental hygiene behind me, and I absolutely love it. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to listen in on my first Fireside chat. So
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, Sherry, I'll tell you, we're on the same page for that. And 100%. First of all, an office should only be billing ethically. And you're exactly right. In a perfect world, and the way that it should be is you do the care that's needed to as a professional to help the patient and treat their disease and maintain their health and that sort of thing. And I would say, it's for that office, what you were describing, it sounds like maybe they drank the Kool-Aid from a consultant or something like that and said, hey, if you do this thing, you'll get a bigger yacht or something like that. But it sounds like that wouldn't be a fit for many, many hygienists. And at the same time, maybe there's some, hopefully not, but that could go in and say, yeah, that's fine. Just I want my paycheck and leave. That's not helping the situation. But again, and I don't mean to keep going back to this, but it's kind of, we're in a bit of a wake-up call for dental offices across, and hygiene clinics across Canada, but in the US as well, where the hygienists and assistants are in quite high demand. And here's a conversation I have not infrequently, where a manager and owner messages me or emails and says, hey, do you have any good people? Send us some good people. And my question back is, well, do you deserve good people? Like, are you working in an office that good people would want to work at? And, sometimes they're not, and sometimes they are. And of course they say, oh yeah, something, but it's the offices that care about all the good things and treat people well that end up being successful at finding and retaining the good clinicians and the good people on their team. And I'm kind of on this crusade to help kind of open the eyes of owners and managers about why this is so important, and especially in this job market in this day and age where this COVID environment has exposed so many cracks in miscommunication and poor leadership and not caring about culture and treating people poorly. It's a big wake-up call. And the offices that treat people well and care about all of the good things that good hygienists and dental assistants care about are the ones who are having a much easier time keeping their office full of the people on their team and not finding these I guess somebody who just says, look, this is a terrible office. I'm going to go here because it's $2 more an hour because it's going to be better than this office. So you're right. And I hope it's a little bit of an eye-opener for offices to kind of place more emphasis and focus on treating people well and doing all of the good things that help the patients and build a healthy team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well said. And yes, Kenneth, 11% is a disappointing, and for me, actually fairly terrifying number. It's too high, but we can't do anything about it. So we're just going to have to hope that number decreases as we get closer. But I feel like this far into the pandemic, if people haven't gotten their vaccine, they're probably not going to. So we'll see how it plays out. I think Afifa has a question. Afifa, you're going to talk, right?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, James. I had a quick question for you, seeing as you have this TempStars company. I have been working in Vancouver for 25 years. I'm going to be moving to the interior soon. I have some work lined up, and I'll be doing a bit of temping in Kamloops.
Oh, nice.
And so what I've noticed is that the hourly wages change dramatically depending on your location, which I don't necessarily agree with because we're working from the same fee guide. Dentists are making the same amount and probably paying less for their rent and whatnot, based on where they are. So I don't agree with that, but I've also gone and asked some of my patients who are nurses. And Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, but a couple of nurses I've spoken to have said that they'll get paid the same amount if they move to Kelowna or if they move to wherever.
Yes, they will, because they have a collective bargaining agreement with government, and they also, because they work for health authorities, so it's standardized.
Right. Okay. So I'm just wondering, James, what you think about that. Do you think that's right, that it should be based on, oh, well, you'll be paying a cheaper cost of living here, so we can just pay you $10 an hour less? Or do you agree with me?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that we started off early, and I promise I'm not dodging the question at all. What we started off with early on was essentially the, I like the idea of free market. And so now we got some pushback about a year ago because when you start to introduce a free market into dental hygiene and dental offices, the demand drives the hourly rates up. And so with us, we we mistakenly got misperceived as saying, oh, you're encouraging hygienists and assistants to make more money and telling them to earn more and ask for more. But what we do is we reduce the friction in the market and just make the connections faster and easier, which allows more real-time adjusting of what the market rates are. Now, I mean, to say that in different areas the hourly rates wouldn't be different, I don't think there's really I mean, aside from nursing, like you mentioned, but I think in most areas, depending on where you are and where you go, the hourly rates do fluctuate. And we did notice that since 2019 to now, the average hourly rate on our system in Ontario on our system went from $40 an hour to $50 an hour. So in the last 2 years, it's gone up $10 an hour. And again, for the supply and demand side. So should every hygienist make the same hourly rate based on their qualifications for everywhere in a province? I guess it's tricky to answer because there's going to be some market forces in there. And so I think that hygienists and assistants and everybody in an office should be paid their respectable wage of what they deserve for their experience and that sort of thing. But I guess I'm not dodging the question, but I'm just trying to think of a hygienist maybe who lives downtown Vancouver versus somebody who is working up in, say, northern BC. And are the hourly rates the same or different? They could be higher up in northern BC if the supply is less. And so now you have fewer hygienists who are being kind of poached by different dental offices and offered higher and higher rates. There could be that situation there. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Do I have a cam loop? So do you mind, I mean, are you able to tell me what, like, how much more or less Kamloops would be offering versus
Well,
Vancouver
so
area?
I'm one of these people that I mean, I've been around long enough that I'm not afraid to have that conversation.
Good. Yeah,
Um,
nice.
because I really believe that I'm worth it,
Yeah.
worth what I'm asking. So I did negotiate with some offices there and will be getting more
Mm-hmm.
than they offered. But I've spoken to so Vancouver, I think right now we're kind of floating at around 55, right?
Okay.
For most hygienists. I really think people need to speak more openly with their employers. And I think a lot of people are afraid to. A lot of
Right.
hygienists, or I don't know why. I know it's an uncomfortable conversation, but so I think that keeps hygienists' wages lower. And so I know some hygienists that I've spoken with in Kamloops that are of 23, 24 years experience getting paid $42 an hour,
Right.
which is not even a unit of scaling. Here, I think
Mm-hmm.
we're at about $49 an hour, and they're terrified to ask for a raise. So
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good
just
point.
because we're not unionized, wouldn't it be great if we just at least, I don't know, I'm dreaming, but it would be great if there was a way for employers to kind of be on the same page, only because we have a British Columbia fee guide. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, it doesn't make any sense to be paying less just because the area you're living in is a lower cost of living, because that's the reason I was given, basically. I know up north you can probably ask for more because I know nurses make quite a bit more up there.
Mm.
And I know some that go up there for 6 months out of the year and then come back and just rest for a while. But yeah, I guess that's why I'm asking you, just because you've got a firsthand knowledge on, I guess, the rates across Canada. And I know the fee guides are different, but I also know that the BC fee guide's one of the lowest. So it's just
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, if you one of the things I'd like to convey from being here is And just like you mentioned, you should feel empowered in today's job market and not feel afraid to have those conversations, because just be aware that you've got in your pocket that if you're not feeling appreciated or paid what you feel you're either worth or what the fair rate is or those sorts of things, don't be afraid to have those conversations, because in your pocket, if you're a good, diligent hygienist who's going to be contributing to the office and taking care of the patients and doing all of those good things, you're in very, very high demand. So I guess, try to lean into that sense of empowerment to say, I want to have this conversation. I can have these conversations. And if it's not a good fit, or I'm not being appreciated, or there's factors here that just aren't for a fit for me right now, just realize there's a really great chance that you're going to be able to find a better situation. Again, going back to the self-reflection, because sometimes that's an element of it. So I don't want to discount that. And I'm not just saying this to hygienists. I say this to everyone. Sometimes we run into these problems and we're causing our own problems. So find something that fits well for you. But if there's something that's not a fit for you, it's also just worth an opportunity for some self-reflection to see if you find your work home, what does that look like for you? And maybe just some brainstorming about, what do I care about in a dental office? And what are the qualities of a dental office that for me are the perfect fit? And that gives you some guidelines to even ask questions at an interview to find a better fit and that sort of thing.
I would say too that as someone who is a consultant before, when we have dental hygienists who have, for their own reasons, been afraid to ask for a raise, some of them will come to me and say, I haven't had a raise in 10 years or 14 years or however many years. The problem is, if you're allowing yourself to be paid under market value, you're bringing down the market value. And so one of the things that I think you'll start to see from BCDHA a little bit as we go through this employment wage discussion is really saying to those dental hygienists, if you're willing to do it for $30 an hour, then suddenly that dentist is going to say, well, I have a great employee for $30 an hour and they're not asking for a raise. So why would I pay someone 50? And unfortunately, it brings the whole market down. So we really think that we need to think about that as a profession and think about the professional responsibility of what is actually a reasonable rate, and make sure that as much as possible, we're encouraging everybody to ask for what they're worth and to really think about that. And James is right. The market right now in BC, we have as many job openings for dental hygienists here in BC as Ontario has. And Ontario has quite a few more bodies and quite a few more hygienists. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. And they won't be going to mandatory vax for dental hygienists. I can almost guarantee you, with their current government, we stand to lose hundreds of dental hygienists through this mandatory vaccination. That's just going to broaden the number of opportunities out there for those of you who are vaccinated. So I do think it's a good time to start thinking about, what is my value and how do I get there?
Great point.
Kayla had mentioned that she's looked at your app and found lots of shifts for Vancouver and area, but not a lot in Abbotsford. So she's wondering if the Fraser Valley has reached out to you much, or what that would be.
Well, thanks for letting me know that, because one of the things we try to do with our service, if you can imagine, I mean, Temstars is, if you kind of boil it down, it's like Uber or it's like Airbnb or that sort of thing, where there's riders and drive, but it's dental offices and hygienists. And we keep a close eye on the geographic locations and the size of our membership on either side of our platform. And we constantly kind of market promote and try to keep things balanced. So if Abbotsford there's not as many shifts posted there, that's a great insight for me, because I can mention to Jen, our marketing director, tomorrow to say, oh, maybe we should do a little campaign out more in that area to get more dental off. Yeah, Fraser Valley on board. That's a great point. So thank you.
Especially since you see in healthcare here that the Fraser Valley is actually the biggest health authority, because they cover Surrey and the numbers are huge, right? So, and Shannon's saying Victoria as well.
Victoria,
so
yeah, okay.
You want to look at your BC campaigns a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really helpful, because tomorrow I'll talk to Jen and we'll see what we can do to boost up the office numbers there. I'll tell you a small thing we ran into in Ontario last year, and just to speak to what you were saying, Andrea, I strongly feel about everybody should be making what they're worth, and they should be making a respectable hourly rate and wage that they can support themselves and their family and their livelihood. One of the things we were running into that we kind of had to mitigate a bit last year in Ontario, at least, was there was some significant what can only be described as gouging. And so what I am, and kind of as I said, I'm very much about what the market is and what people are worth and that sort of thing. But kind of like gas, right? Like if there's a gas shortage, could gas stations charge triple for their gas? Yeah, people are still going to buy it, but should they? Probably not. And so we ran into a thing where there was a very small percentage that were asking for what really could be only described as sort of these astronomical, unreasonable gouging rates. And we had to put a couple little guardrails on to avoid that, because it was affecting our entire membership. Because then offices are thinking, who are these crazy hygienists and assistants coming through temp stars? We're not going to use them anymore. But then, of course, that affects every other hygienist and assistant that is looking to find temping and hiring shifts through our application. So I would say 100%. But if you are looking at amounts or rates that are just drastically higher and trying to take advantage of a situation, all that does is set you up for probably a poor relationship with the owner or manager, because now they're thinking, well, this person caught me in a really tricky situation. They kind of took advantage of it. So I'm not happy about it, but now I'm kind of stuck. So yes, I've hired this person, but that's not going to set up a super healthy dynamic. So 100%, the demand is going up. Hourly rates are trending up for sure. But at the same time, consider that whole package of what it's like to work at the office. Is this your work home? Do you think you'll respect the people that you're working with and enjoy working there? So consider it as a whole package, and not the short-term gain of hardballing something that's astronomically high, far above what normal market rates could be, even though they are going up. So I'm not discounting what we're saying. I'm just saying we ran into that in Ontario, and it was just, again, a very small percentage, but it ended up souring the soup a little bit that way.
I'm just conscious of time, so we're not going to go much longer here, James. There is a question around if your owner is not vaccinated and associate is. So long as there is someone who, if it's a regular practice that is owned by a dentist, there has to be someone there who is a licensed dentist or registered to practice dentist. So they can bring in a locum. If there's one partner that is and one partner that isn't, the partner that isn't is out the door, and the partner that is can carry on the practice exactly as it is. So the way that the BC has set up the ownership laws is that you have to be a dentist to own a dental clinic. You have to be a dental hygienist to own a dental hygiene practice. So so that's what right now the BCDHA or the BCDA is recommending to their dentist members, that if they're not vaccinated, they start looking now for locum support that will come into their clinic and cover their clinic for that time, because otherwise the clinic is not able to stay open. So we'll see how that goes.
And is it your understanding, on the dentist side of things, does the dentist lose their license similar to what you're describing as the hygienist?
Everybody does.
They'll lose that. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So just a quick last question for you from me then, as you're looking at your dental hygienist out here in BC, when that law comes down, it affects you. You could have dental hygienists who are unvaxxed, right? Or do you check them now?
Well, so right now there isn't the requirement, but what we're building into our service, and I'll tell you what we're building in that's on our roadmap right now for the next couple of weeks, is we are about, I guess, transparency and happy matches. And so what we've got roadmap for the service is the dental office, and we'll be adjusting this for BC. So I'm telling you how we've got it planned out, but this is new information over the last few weeks, so we're going to be adjusting it accordingly. But because we're serving the US as well, we're basically asking the dental office, do you require anybody working at your office to show proof of full vaccination? And they say yes or no. And then when they post a shift or they're posting a job, then there's a blurb on it with an icon that says this office requires you to show proof of full vaccination to work at this office. And then when say for a temping shift, when a hygienist or assistant is saying, okay, I'll work that, there's a little pop-up that says, okay, heads up, this office is requiring, you won't be able to work at this office unless you show proof of full vaccination. Are you confirming that you're fully vaccinated? Now and then they just hit yes. Now,
and so in the case of BC, though, will you even continue to have dental hygienists that are, because they won't have a license?
Well, they won't have a license. They can't.
So you check that when they...
We will. When this comes down, we will. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
what I figured. Interesting. It's interesting times, everyone. So just to remind everyone that if you run into trouble in need an employment lawyer, we do provide that for dental hygienists. You just need to email myself or Jazz Chahal, who's on our website. He's one of our practice advisors, and we will connect you directly with Leah Moody from Simfar to Markin, and she can help you with your situation if you have an actual legal challenge that you need to deal with. So just a reminder of that. That's important when you're talking about employment things. But mostly I want to say thank you to James. This has been really great. Certainly appreciate having you. We'll probably have you back sometime.
Well, I'd love to. I've really enjoyed it too. And I really, like I said at the beginning, I'm only here to provide as much value as I can for people who are spending their time to listen to the things I have to say. So I'm happy to, I'd love to come back if there's anything else you want me to jump in on or talk about. I really appreciate being here and being part of this.
Awesome. All right, everyone, we will wrap it up. It's 8:15, so we stayed a little longer than usual, and we're back in 2 weeks. So we'll hopefully have an update on what's going on with the vaccine mandate. And James, we can connect on that too if it's helpful to you as that process moves along.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, James.
Okay,
Thank you,
yeah.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good
Have a good night. Okay, bye.